Hey everyone, After Later Audio just released 6 new modules as a part of its Nightlife mixer series. The Bartender, which is a performance mixer in the center of everything. The Barbacks, which are expandable channels to the Bartender. Send VCA, which is an expandable VC control over the auxiliary sends. Cast Iron, simple VC panner. Mingles, which is 2 3-channel mixers and panner on top of that with an LFO. So let's just call it a complex and creative mixer panner. And finally, there's a simple USB interface to send your jam sessions right into your DAW for recording. Today, I'm going to focus mostly on the Bartender and the Barbacks. I'll go through the other modules in upcoming videos. So After Later Audio sent these to me for free, so I might be a little bit biased, but I think it's worth saying anyway that I think they really nailed these modules. So in this video, I want to explain why I think that. First, I'm going to do a quick walkthrough of all its features and show you some common uses or ways you could use it. And then second, I want to do a quick comparison between the Bartender and the Barbacks and other performance mixers on the market. I was actually in the market for a performance mixer and I was looking at 2 in particular. I was thinking about the WMD performance mixer, and I was also thinking about doing a DIY build of the Bafako Hexmex and Expander. And right around the time when I was starting to make decisions between those 2, that's when After Later Audio sent me their Bartender. It was perfect timing, and I gotta say I'm really happy with it. So I did a ton of research on those modules, and I want to talk about how they stack up compared to the Bartender. If you have a performance mixer that you use and like that I don't mention here, make sure to list it down in the comment section. It's always great to have options if you're looking for these types of things. And if you're in the market for a performance mixer and you want to buy the Bartender, I put affiliate links to Perfect Circuit in the description. I'd really appreciate it if you click through there and bought it. It's a great way to support my channel. I get a small tip and it doesn't cost you anything. Okay, so with all that said, let's head over to the modules. All right, let's get started. So here are all the brand new modules. There's the Bartender, which is right here, the 4-channel mixer. I got 2 Barbacks right here and right here. The Send VCA, which is what we use to control the send output. Cast Iron, this is that simple VC panner. Mingles, which is the dual 3-channel mixer plus panner plus LFO. And then finally over here we have the USB out, so you can get recordings and you can also get lines out too. So today we're just going to focus right here on the Bartender. I have my Barbacks plugged into the back to expand this from a 4-channel mixer to an 8-channel mixer. I really like that After Later released these as like a main mixer plus expanders that you can connect in the back. A couple of reasons is number one, that you can customize it. So if you really only need a small mixer like this, you can just buy the small one and you don't need to take up as much space. But as your needs grow or you want more channels, you can add on more Barbacks. And I think you can get up to like 16 channels or something like that. So really you can get it pretty big. You can even combine 2 Bartenders together. But it also helps keep the cost down a little bit. They're selling it for $360 and the Barbacks are each about $160. So that's kind of nice too. The cost of entry, you can just get one and then you can get the others later. It has all the functions that you would expect from a regular mixer. If you've used typical mixers, then you'll feel right at home with this. Each of the channels are in stereo. You can also flick it to mono, but they have the capability of being stereo channels. We've got 2 auxiliary sends, which I'm going to show you in just a second. And you can choose which one you go to, or you can just shut it off in the middle. You can't send to both at the same time. You also have the ability to choose whether or not the signal gets sent before the fader or after the fader. And I'll show you why that's important when we get to the music. Right here we have typical gain control that you'd find on a regular mixer. These are the send outs, so this controls the level of the signal that goes to the sends. And then also this knob can be controlled through voltage control if you buy this Send VCA expander. Lastly, we have our panner, panning left and right. And those are all the knobs and inputs. Oh, and of course you can control pan and level through voltage control as well. Down here we have our sliders that obviously control our levels. And then we have our mute switches. I like these switches. You can flick them up to have the mute stay on, have it latch. And then if you want to push it down, it's a temporary mute, or it only stays on as long as you're holding it. So that's kind of cool to have both of those. Finally, over here, we have our send outs, send returns, and also we have our main line outs, and you can also send out a mono signal as well. Finally, at the bottom, we have DJ style queuing, which I think is why we can really classify this as a performance mixer. And this is if you want to plug in your headphones here, you can turn it to the queue and then flip these up and you'll obviously hear those. So that way you can kind of program in something and figure it out before you send it out to its main signal. So let's make a quick patch. I've got a drum beat set up on my sequencer off the screen. We'll send those signals through the pipe and just put together a quick drum beat. All right, I got a simple drum beat set up. I'm using Shack Modular's battering ram, plats for a snare, and mute and hi-hats for open and closed hi-hats. So before we get to the sends, which is the part of this that I just really love, let me show you the mutes real quick. As I said before, you can latch them by pushing up and do temporary mutes by pushing them down. Pretty great. Let me show you the send and return. I'm sure there's all kinds of different creative uses for send and returns. You can get feedback and just get really creative with them. But the ones that just jump to mind initially are using it, number one, for effects. Number two is to create sort of sub mixes. And then number three, another common use for them is parallel compression. So I'm just going to walk through those three things. So first of all, let's start with Cumulus, which is another Afterlater module. This is a Mutable Instruments Clouds clone. And let's go ahead and send out our signal from send one into Cumulus. Now what we can do, we have a few different choices. We could either send the signal from the Cumulus back in through the return and then it'll be connected to these faders, or we can send it to a separate track. Now, that's really up to you. Generally speaking, because I'm going to be sending all of four of these, the entire drum track to the Cumulus, I'm probably going to want to not use the return, because then it would send that signal to each of the tracks and sort of be doubling it over each other. So what I'm going to do is actually send it to another track on one of the Barbacks. We could even reverse these. That might be kind of cool. So that way you hear the Cumulus on one side. Oh, we're getting feedback. I was getting feedback there because I had it actually set to send it to itself. Let's see if I can do that again. I bet you if I send a signal, you can hear it going. Anyway, that was just, so there's where it's like, I wonder how we can route these things to get some interesting stuff. I was sending this one to Cumulus and also routing it back through. So it was kind of creating this loop. Anyway, enough experimenting. Let me show you what I was planning on showing you. So here we're going to set all of these to go to send one. All of our tracks are set to mono because we only have those ones coming in. This one I'm going to set to stereo because we're getting a stereo feed from the Cumulus. Now here's where the pre and post fader switches come into play. If we do post fader, then as we turn this down, the Cumulus won't get any signal from our bass drum. But as we turn it up, it will get signal. If we set it to pre, then the Cumulus will still get the signal from the bass drum, even if we turn this down, but we won't be getting our dry signal in. I mean, there's a bunch of different reasons you might want to do that. Like if you want the Cumulus kind of granular effect, that distant, reverby bass to still ring out, but you want to take the dry sound out of it, then that would be pretty cool. And then you can fade it in. Another thing that's pretty common is for your wet-dry mix to turn it all the way up when you're using effects through a send receive, just because now if you do that, then this will be controlling how much of the effect you have, and this will be controlling how much of a dry signal you have. So you can kind of control the wet-dry mix there. That's just how I was taught when I was taught how to use like regular mixers for like live sound. But really, you know, that's a creative aesthetic choice, so that's entirely up to you. But here we go. So because I have it on pre-fader, the signal is still going out to Cumulus with these sends controlling the level, these knobs here. And this is where the send VCA, if you want to buy that expander, you could do it through voltage control, or you could just use these knobs, even though the dry signal is totally out. So this is the wet signal from Cumulus. And then I can add in the dry signals here. So let's do that. Pretty awesome stuff. Let's try the parallel compression. In this case, I'm going to send it out into a compressor module, and we'll actually use the return function here. See, parallel compression is such a great way to, you can apply really heavy compression to the drums and really squash it. And doing that on its own would kind of flatten the sound. But then if you layer the dry signal on top of the compressed signal, you can still get that punchiness of an uncompressed sound. And by mixing those together, then you can really get this kind of like dense but yet punchy drum track. That's just a common technique that seems to be kind of hip and modern to create like modern drum sounds. And so that's what we're doing here. So we're sending it out into a compressor, and it's coming back in to the send, so that I can control the amount of signal going out here, and I'm going to set them to pre so that it's sending out that signal. If we really push the compressor, we can get some great distorted tones too. And then, of course, another great use would be just to use this as a mixer for your individual tracks. Right now I'm sending out of send and into another channel. And I have these muted here, but it's going in the pre. So what I can do is I can control the output of these individual tracks using the send. And that way I can adjust their mix together. And then I can use this fader to control all of the drums together. The reason I'm muting these is because if they're not muted, then you would basically double the bass, double the snare, double the hi-hats. And this way I can control the internal mix of the drums as well as the levels of the drums as a whole. See, I can fade out the entire drum set. We're going to adjust the mix of the individual drums. Now, of course, there are other ways to do that using mixers, but hey, I figured it would be great to show it off because that's a common way that I like to use buses. So that's the Bartender and the Barbacks. So as I said in the intro, I want to talk a little bit about these and performance mixers in general and kind of compare these to some of the other ones in the market. So I know, as I said at the beginning, that After Later gave these things to me for free. And I know as a consumer that oftentimes when I watch videos and people are like, hey, I was given this for free, you kind of take their word with a grain of salt. So here's my reasoning of why I probably would have just bought the Bartender had I not been given them. When I was looking at performance mixers, I was looking at the WMD performance mixer and the Befacco Hex Mech system because I like to build my own modules. So here are some of the differences. The WMD, it's kind of highly regarded as one of the best, and comparing it to the Bartender, first of all, the price difference, it's over $900 new. It's been out for a while, so there's lots of used deals floating around, but the Bartender is only $360 new. Now granted, to get the same amount of tracks as the performance mixer, you would have to add on 2 barbacks, but it's still cheaper to go with After Later's new. I think you'd probably even be able to get new modules from After Later for cheaper than you would used WMD performance mixer. There are 8 channels on the WMD, 6 of them are mono, and you get 2 stereo ones, as opposed to After Later's, where each of the channels has stereo capability. Plus, you can also add more barbacks and expand it as necessary, or shrink it as necessary. I mean, this takes up a lot of space, even in this this rack, which I use for my videos, which is pretty small. I mean, that's a pretty significant chunk of the rack. So if you don't want such a big rack, you can actually just buy the Bartender and have a smaller performance mixer. So I kind of like that it's customizable like that, which the WMD is not. So the WMD does have the ability to switch between 2 mono inputs per track. So I think that means that you can plug basically 2 signals going into one track and kind of switch between them. You don't get that with the Barback. It's really just like you plug in your input into a track. But you know, so that's one feature that the WMD has that the Bartender doesn't have. Also, to get any of these mutes, you would have to buy an expander for the WMD performance mixer. And the expander, I don't believe, has the same functionality where you could latch the mute and then do a temporary mute if you want to. I think it just has the buttons, although you can do a combo button and press a few of them at the same time to turn them on and off. But so there's some differences there, but it does not come stock with the WMD performance mixer, and it does come stock with the After Later's Bartender. So that's why I would probably put the Bartender above WMD's performance mixer. The Befacco Hex Mech system is also a great option. It's around $600 if you build it yourself. Buying it totally new would be much more expensive. It only has mono inputs, and you would have to buy both the system and the expander to get the send outputs. And you would get 3 of them, but the sends are only mono sends. To me, the Befacco ones just didn't have the same appeal as the WMD performance mixer. I was actually leaning heavily in that direction. And I like the Bartender. I just like the way it's set up more than the Hexmech system. I like the faders. That's kind of why I would lean towards this. So that's why I think that these are a pretty solid buy. Compared to other ones out there, it's the cheapest one that I found and it has more features than the other ones, and the full stereo inputs, the 2 channels for send and returns, and the ability to do latch as well as temporary mutes. That kind of puts it over the edge for me. So there you have it. That's the Bartender. I'm going to be showcasing more of Afterlater's modules in upcoming videos, so make sure you like and subscribe. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.